My name is Eleanor Thompson, and at 68 years old I thought I knew heartbreak. But nothing prepared me for what happened at my only son Michael's wedding. I raised him alone after his father left, working double shifts and sacrificing everything. I was so proud watching him marry Stephanie, despite her family's obvious disdain for me. I never imagined my own child would humiliate me in front of everyone. Before I tell you how my own son broke my heart at his wedding reception, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and like if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. The morning after would change everything. I grew up in a small Nebraska town where everybody knew everybody. My father worked at the grain elevator, and my mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families. We never had much, but we had enough. I started working at 16, waitressing at the local diner to save for community college. I had dreams of becoming a teacher someday. Then I met Richard when I was 19. He was handsome, charming, and passing through town on his way to bigger things. I fell hard and fast. We married when I was 20, and Michael came along 2 years later. I thought we were happy, or at least I was. But when Michael turned 3, Richard announced he had found someone else. He packed his bags, kissed Michael on the forehead, and walked out of our lives forever. No child support, no visits, nothing but a forwarding address that changed every few months until eventually the letters started returning unopened. I had no choice but to pick up the pieces. I took on multiple jobs, waitressing during the day, stocking shelves at the grocery store at night. My mother would watch Michael when she could, but often he had to come with me, sitting quietly in the corner of the diner coloring or doing homework. I still remember him falling asleep on the bench seats, his little head resting on his backpack. When Michael was in elementary school, I managed to get a job as a receptionist at an insurance office. It paid better and had regular hours. I could finally attend his school events. I never missed a single one. Not a baseball game, science fair, or parent-teacher conference. I was mother and father both. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I saved every extra penny for Michael's college fund. I wanted him to have the opportunities one never did. Sometimes I went without meals so he could have new sneakers or join the school field trip. I never let him know how tight things were. I wanted him to feel normal, not burdened by our circumstances. Michael was a bright, loving child. He would make me cards for every holiday, even the minor ones. To the best mom in the world. He would write in his crooked handwriting. Those cards were my treasures. I kept every single one in a box beneath my bed. As Michael grew older, things began to change. He won a scholarship to a prestigious university 3 states away. I was so proud, even though it meant seeing him only during holidays. During his freshman year, he called every Sunday without fail. By junior year, the calls became monthly, then occasionally. When he did call, he talked mostly about his classes, his friends, and eventually Stephanie. The first time he mentioned her, his voice changed. It became softer, more animated. Stephanie was studying business, came from Connecticut, and her father was some kind of executive. I could tell Michael was smitten, and I was happy for him. But when he started talking about her family's vacation home and their trips to Europe, I sensed the growing gap between his new world and our old one. Michael brought Stephanie home during spring break of his senior year. She was beautiful, polished, and clearly from money. She was polite to me but seemed uncomfortable in our small apartment. She kept looking around as if searching for something more impressive. When I served the pot roast I had spent all day preparing, she picked at it and asked if the meat was organic. I didn't know how to answer that. After graduation, Michael moved to Chicago for a job at a marketing firm. Stephanie followed, having secured a position at a financial company through her father's connections. They moved in together, and Michael's visits home became even rarer. When he did come, he would comment on how small everything seemed, how the town lacked good restaurants, how different his life in Chicago was. I smiled and nodded, even as I felt him slipping away. When Michael called to tell me he and Stephanie were engaged, I cried tears of joy. Despite our growing distance, he was still my son, my whole world. I immediately started saving for a proper mother-of-the-groom dress. I wanted to make him proud. Then came the discussions about the wedding. It would be held in Connecticut, at Stephanie's parents' country club. The guest list would be over 200 people, mostly Stephanie's family and their social circle. I was allowed to invite 10 people, most of whom couldn't afford to travel across the country. I spent months preparing. I found a navy blue dress on sale and had it altered to fit perfectly. I visited the salon for the first time in years for a proper haircut and style. I practiced walking in new heels around my apartment. I wanted so badly to fit in to not embarrass Michael. The week before the wedding, I carefully wrapped my gift for the couple. It was my grandmother's antique brooch, the only real heirloom our family had. The delicate silver piece with small pearls wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, but it had been passed down through 4 generations of women in my family. I wrote a heartfelt note explaining its history and significance. As I boarded the plane to Connecticut, my heart was full of hope. Perhaps this wedding would bring Michael and me closer again. Maybe his new family would welcome me with open arms. I imagined bonding with Stephanie's mother over our shared love for Michael. I pictured dancing with my son at the reception, him whispering "Thanks for everything, Mom," in my ear. I arrived 2 days before the wedding. Michael had arranged for me to stay at the hotel where other out-of-town guests were staying, rather than with Stephanie's family who had a large home nearby. He explained they were too busy with wedding preparations to host me properly. I understood, or tried to. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunshine and blue skies. I dressed carefully in my hotel room, applying makeup with a steady hand despite my nerves. The brooch was tucked safely in my purse, waiting for the perfect moment to present it. The country club was more magnificent than I had imagined. Sprawling green lawns, white columns, flower arrangements taller than me. I arrived early, not wanting to miss a moment. A young usher greeted me with a program. "Family of the bride or groom?" he asked. "I'm the mother of the groom," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. His eyebrows raised slightly. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson. This way, please." He led me not to the front row where I had expected to sit, but to the second row. I noticed Stephanie's extended family filling the entire front row on both sides. The only people in the front row on the groom's side were Michael's college roommate and his wife, who had been selected as best man. "There must be some mistake," I said quietly. "I'm Michael's mother." The usher looked uncomfortable. "These are the seating arrangements I was given, ma'am." I sat down, smoothing my dress over my knees, trying to swallow my disappointment. A few minutes later, I overheard Stephanie's mother Nancy speaking to another woman just behind me. "The groom's mother," she whispered, not quite softly enough. "You'd think she could have found something more appropriate to wear. That dress must be from a department store." I kept my eyes forward, my back straight. I would not let them see me wounded. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Stephanie looked stunning in her designer gown, and Michael was so handsome in his tuxedo it brought tears to my eyes. When he saw Stephanie walking down the aisle, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a little boy on Christmas morning. After the ceremony, the photographer began arranging people for pictures. Stephanie's entire extended family was called forward. Then Michael and Stephanie with his best man and her maid of honor. I stood patiently waiting to be included. "That's all for the formal shots," the photographer finally announced. I stepped forward. "Excuse me, but we haven't taken any photos with the groom's family." The photographer looked confused. "Is there more of the groom's family here?" "I'm his mother," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "Oh, of course. Michael, let's get one with your mom." Michael came over, putting his arm around me stiffly. "Mom, we have a tight schedule. The cocktail hour is starting." One quick photo, and he was gone again, swept up in Stephanie's large family circle. During the cocktail hour I tried to mingle. I introduced myself to Stephanie's relatives, who would smile politely then find reasons to drift away. I spotted Stephanie's mother Nancy holding court with several elegant women. I approached with a genuine smile. "The ceremony was lovely," I said. "Stephanie looks beautiful." Nancy turned, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Eleanor, isn't it?" "Yes, we're so pleased with how everything turned out. I was wondering if you and I might find time to have lunch before I leave town. I'd love to get to know Michael's new family better." Nancy glanced at her watch. "Oh, I'm afraid we'll be quite busy with cleanup and hosting out-of-town guests. Perhaps another time when you visit." Before I could respond, she turned back to her friends. I stood there for a moment invisible before walking away. I found a quiet corner and watched as Michael laughed and chatted with Stephanie's father. They looked comfortable together, sharing inside jokes and clapping each other on the back. I couldn't remember the last time Michael had laughed like that with me. An older gentleman approached, introducing himself as Stephanie's great-uncle. He was kind, asking about my flight and where I was from. For a few minutes I felt like a real person again. But soon Stephanie's father called him away for a family photo, apologizing to me with a tight smile. I spent the rest of the cocktail hour alone, nursing a glass of white wine, watching my son become part of another family while I stood on the periphery. When it was time to move to the reception hall, I followed the crowd. A seating chart near the entrance showed me at table 15, far from the head table where Michael and Stephanie would sit with her parents and the best man and maid of honor. I was seated with some distant cousins of Stephanie's and an elderly great-aunt who was hard of hearing. I watched as Michael and Stephanie entered the hall to applause. They looked so happy, so perfect together. Despite everything, my heart swelled with love for my son. I had done this, raised a man who could build a successful life, who could be worthy of such a beautiful bride. Even if there was no place for me in that picture, I had done my job. As the reception continued, I kept waiting for Michael to come find me, to introduce me to someone, to share a moment with me. But he was constantly surrounded by Stephanie's family, moving from table to table, never quite making it to mine. The speeches began. Stephanie's father spoke at length about his wonderful daughter, about welcoming Michael into their family, about the bright future ahead for the young couple. He never once mentioned me or acknowledged that Michael had a family of his own. When Michael stood to give his thank you speech, I held my breath. Here it was. The moment he would acknowledge me, would thank me for everything. "I want to thank the Wilsons for welcoming me into their amazing family," he began, "and for throwing us this incredible wedding. I'm so grateful to have gained not just a wife today, but a second family who has shown me such generosity and love." That was it. No mention of his first family. No acknowledgement of the woman who had raised him alone. I applauded along with everyone else, my hands numb. When the first dance was announced, I watched from my table as Michael and Stephanie swayed gracefully across the floor. I remembered teaching him to dance in our tiny kitchen, his feet on top of mine as we moved around the linoleum floor to the radio. He had been 10 years old, practicing for a school dance. "You're the only girl I'll ever love, Mom," he had said then. As I watched him now, holding another woman with such tenderness, I felt both pride and loss. This was as it should be. Children grow up, move on, start their own families. But the complete erasure of our shared past, of my role in his life, cut deeper than I could have imagined. I considered leaving early. I could slip out quietly, call a taxi back to my hotel, fly home tomorrow instead of the next day. No one would notice my absence. But I had come all this way, spent money I could barely afford, and I still had my grandmother's brooch to give. So I stayed, forcing a smile whenever anyone happened to glance my way. The reception venue was even more extravagant than the ceremony. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables adorned with elaborate flower arrangements and fine china. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Everything spoke of wealth and privilege. A world so far removed from the one in which I had raised Michael. My table, number 15, was positioned near the back of the room, far from the dance floor and the head table. I sat with Stephanie's mother's cousin and her husband, who were more interested in their phones than conversation, and an elderly great-aunt who kept asking me to repeat everything I said. There were 2 empty seats at our table, making it feel even more like the leftovers collection. After the first dance, I watched as the professional photographer arranged the bridal party and both sets of parents for formal photos. Stephanie's parents stood proudly beside the couple, beaming for the camera. I remained seated, not having been called forward. When they finished, I approached the photographer. "Excuse me, will there be photos with the groom's family as well?" He looked confused. "I was given a shot list by the couple. Are you not on it?" "I'm Michael's mother," I explained. He glanced at his clipboard. "Oh, I see. We've already done the parent shots. Let me check if we can fit in one more." He consulted with Stephanie's mother, who glanced my way with a tight smile and shook her head slightly. The photographer returned, apologetic. I'm sorry, we're running behind schedule. Maybe during the reception we can grab a quick one. That quick photo never materialized. I tried to mingle, approaching a group of young men I recognized as Michael's college friends. They were clustered near the bar, laughing about shared memories. Hello, I said. I'm Eleanor, Michael's mom. They looked startled, as if they hadn't expected me to speak to them. Oh, hi, one of them said. Nice to meet you. Michael has told me so much about his college days, I said, though in truth he had shared very little. I feel like I know you all already. They exchanged glances. Really? That's cool, another replied. So you live in Nebraska, right? Yes, still in the same town where Michael grew up. Cool, he said, then turned back to his friends and continued their previous conversation as if I wasn't there. I drifted away, finding myself near a display of photos of the couple. There were pictures of Stephanie as a child, of both of them in college, of their travels together. There were photos with Stephanie's family holidays, vacations, casual backyard gatherings. There wasn't a single photo of Michael with me, not one image from his childhood or any part of his life before college. It was as if his life had begun when he met Stephanie, as if the previous 20 years had been erased. All my sacrifices, all our shared memories, deemed unworthy of acknowledgement. I found myself thinking of all the school events I had attended alone, sitting in uncomfortable auditorium chairs, clapping until my hands hurt as Michael received academic awards, standing on the sidelines of baseball games cheering myself hoarse, driving him to music lessons after working double shifts. I had been so proud to be his mother, had centered my entire life around giving him opportunities. When dinner was announced, there was a formal procession to the tables. The bride and groom were seated first, followed by her parents and the bridal party. Then Stephanie's extended family was called by table number, starting with those closest to the head table. Table by table, the guests were seated and served. The servers moved efficiently through the room, bringing out beautifully plated appetizers followed by salads. The table next to mine was served, then the one behind it. Somehow my table was overlooked. As the main course began arriving at the first tables, I noticed an elderly woman at my table looking concerned. Did they forget us? She asked loudly, her hearing aid whistling. I smiled reassuringly. I'm sure they'll get to us soon. But more tables were served, and still our table waited. People began to notice, glancing our way with curiosity or pity. I kept my back straight, my expression pleasant, even as embarrassment washed over me in waves. Finally, as the head table was being served dessert, a harried-looking server approached our table with plates that looked noticeably different from what I had seen served elsewhere. Sorry for the wait, he said, not meeting our eyes as he set down the plates. My meal was cold. The meat was tough, the vegetables wilted, the sauce congealed. It was clearly the leftovers, reheated poorly and thrown together without care. I looked around and saw the same on everyone's plates at our table. The elderly aunt poked at her food. This isn't what everyone else got, is it? I tried to cut the meat, struggling with its toughness. I'm sure it's fine, I said quietly, not wanting to make a scene. As I forced myself to take a bite, I saw Michael approaching our table. For a moment my heart lifted. He had noticed the oversight and was coming to make it right. He stopped beside me, Stephanie at his side. How's everything, Mom? Enjoying the food? Before I could answer, he leaned closer to Stephanie and said in a stage whisper, loud enough for the entire table to hear. She's used to eating what life leaves behind. Stephanie giggled. The couple at our table laughed uncomfortably. The elderly aunt, who hadn't heard, looked confused. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, mocking my life circumstances created by sacrificing everything for him. Michael seemed to realize his joke had fallen flat. Just kidding, Mom. Glad you could make it. He patted my shoulder awkwardly, then led Stephanie away to the next table. I sat there, food turning to ash in my mouth, forcing myself to keep smiling. Inside, something was breaking. A final thread snapping after years of gradual fraying. I finished my meal mechanically, not tasting a single bite. The conversation at the table had died after Michael's comment, everyone avoiding eye contact. When I was done, I quietly excused myself, claiming I needed some fresh air. Instead, I went to the gift table and retrieved the small box containing my grandmother's brooch. I slipped it into my purse. Then I found my wrap, gathered my belongings, and walked out of the reception without saying goodbye to anyone. No one called after me. No one came looking for me. As far as I could tell, no one even noticed I had gone. The night air was cool on my face as I waited for the taxi I had called. Tears threatened, but I held them back. Not here, not now. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I stared out the window at the passing lights, memories flooding unbidden. Michael taking his first steps, arms outstretched toward me. Michael on his first day of school, brave face betrayed by nervous eyes. Michael at his high school graduation, throwing his cap in the air and then finding me in the crowd with a smile. Michael helping me move to a smaller apartment when the recession hit, promising he'd make me proud. When I reached my hotel room, I finally allowed the tears to come. I sat on the edge of the bed in my expensive dress and cried until there was nothing left. Then I carefully removed the dress, hung it up, and packed my suitcase. I would change my flight to the earliest available tomorrow. There was no reason to stay. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. My mind kept replaying Michael's words, the laughter that followed, the years of growing distance that had led to this moment. What had I done wrong? When had my beloved son become this person who could hurt me so casually, so publicly? Perhaps it was my fault. Perhaps I had loved him too much, sacrificed too visibly, made him feel burdened by my devotion. Or perhaps I simply didn't fit into the life he wanted now. A life of country clubs and European vacations, of polished manners and social connections. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Something had to change. I couldn't continue like this, giving everything and receiving scraps of attention in return. For the first time in decades, I needed to think about myself, about what I deserved. As dawn broke, I had not slept, but I had reached a decision. My relationship with Michael could not continue as it was. Either it would transform into something healthier with mutual respect, or it would have to end. The thought of losing my only child was agonizing, but the slow death of 1,000 small humiliations was worse. The elaborate meal service had begun with a flourish. Servers in crisp uniforms presented the head table with the first course, delicate plates of seared scallops garnished with microgreens and edible flowers. The presentation was stunning, like something from a cooking show. Table by table, the service continued. The tables closest to the head table were served first, Stephanie's immediate family, then close friends, then extended family. The food looked and smelled amazing. Guests exclaimed over the presentation and flavor. Our table, number 15, waited. I sipped water and maintained light conversation with the elderly great-aunt seated beside me. Her name was Gladys, and she was Stephanie's grandfather's sister. The young couple looked so happy, Gladys said, adjusting her hearing aid. Have you known Stephanie long? I've only met her a few times, I admitted. They live in Chicago, and I'm in Nebraska. Nebraska. My late husband and I drove through there once. Lots of corn. She patted my hand. It's hard when they move far away, isn't it? Her kindness nearly undid me. Yes, it is. As more tables received their appetizers, then salads, then main courses, our table continued to wait. I noticed people glancing our way, whispering. The server seemed to be deliberately avoiding eye contact with us. Did they forget about us? Gladys asked loudly. The couple across from us, Stephanie's mother's cousin and his wife, looked uncomfortable. I'm sure they'll get to us soon, the woman said, checking her watch. Another 20 minutes passed. The head table and front tables were being served dessert now. Still, our table had received nothing, not even bread. I was starving, having been too nervous to eat much before the wedding. Finally, a harried-looking server approached our table. He didn't look at us as he quickly set down plates that were noticeably different from what I had seen served elsewhere. The plate placed before me contained what looked like the remnants from other plates. A small portion of tough-looking meat, wilted vegetables, and a congealed sauce. It was room temperature at best. Gladys poked at her food with her fork. This doesn't look like what everyone else got. I'm sure it's fine, I said, not wanting to make a scene. I tried to cut the meat, finding it so tough it barely yielded to my knife. The vegetables were overcooked and cold. The sauce had separated, leaving an oily residue on the plate. As I struggled to eat with dignity, I felt a presence beside me. Looking up, I saw Michael standing there with Stephanie. My heart lifted momentarily. He had noticed the oversight and was coming to make it right. "How's everything, Mom? Enjoying the food?" he asked, a strange smile playing at his lips. Before I could answer, he leaned toward Stephanie and said in a voice loud enough for our entire table to hear, "She's used to eating what life leaves behind." Stephanie giggled. The couple at our table laughed uncomfortably. Gladys, who hadn't heard clearly, looked confused. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, the words hitting me like a physical blow. My own son, mocking my circumstances created by sacrificing everything for him. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. People at nearby tables had heard. Some laughed, others looked away in second-hand embarrassment. I felt heat rising in my cheeks but maintained my composure, a skill perfected through years of hardship. Michael seemed to realize his joke had fallen flat. "Just kidding, Mom. Glad you could make it." He patted my shoulder awkwardly, then led Stephanie away to the next table. I sat there, food turning to ash in my mouth, forcing myself to keep smiling. Inside, something was breaking, a final thread snapping after years of gradual fraying. The conversation at our table had died. Gladys patted my hand again but said nothing. The cousin and his wife suddenly found their phones fascinating. I finished my meal mechanically, not tasting a single bite. When I was done, I quietly excused myself, claiming I needed some fresh air. Instead, I went to the gift table and retrieved the small box containing my grandmother's brooch. I slipped it into my purse. Then I found my wrap, gathered my belongings, and walked out of the reception without saying goodbye to anyone. No one called after me. No one came looking for me. As far as I could tell, no one even noticed I had gone. The night air was cool against my hot cheeks as I waited for the taxi I had called. Tears threatened, but I held them back. Not here, not now. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I stared out the window at the passing lights, memories flooding unbidden. Michael taking his first steps, arms outstretched toward me. Michael on his first day of school, brave face betrayed by nervous eyes. Michael at his high school graduation, throwing his cap in the air and then finding me in the crowd with a smile. Michael helping me move to a smaller apartment when the recession hit, promising he'd make me proud. When I reached my hotel room, I finally allowed the tears to come. I sat on the edge of the bed in my expensive dress and cried until there was nothing left. Then I carefully removed the dress, hung it up, and packed my suitcase. I would change my flight to the earliest available tomorrow. There was no reason to stay. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. My mind kept replaying Michael's words, the laughter that followed, the years of growing distance that had led to this moment. What had I done wrong? When had my beloved son become this person who could hurt me so casually, so publicly? Perhaps it was my fault. Perhaps I had loved him too much, sacrificed too visibly, made him feel burdened by my devotion. Or perhaps I simply didn't fit into the life he wanted now. A life of country clubs and European vacations, of polished manners and social connections. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Something had to change. I couldn't continue like this, giving everything and receiving scraps of attention in return. For the first time in decades, I needed to think about myself, about what I deserved. As dawn broke, I had not slept, but I had reached a decision. My relationship with Michael could not continue as it was. Either it would transform into something healthier with mutual respect, or it would have to end. The thought of losing my only child was agonizing, but the slow death of 1,000 small humiliations was worse. Morning found me sitting by the hotel window, watching the sun rise over the manicured grounds. I had not slept at all. My eyes were swollen from crying, my heart heavy with grief and resolution. I called the airline and changed my flight to that afternoon, paying the change fee without hesitation. Then I ordered coffee from room service, unable to face the prospect of running into wedding guests at the hotel restaurant. As I sipped the bitter coffee, I pulled out the small photo album I always traveled with. It contained snapshots of Michael's childhood. His first steps, first day of kindergarten, baseball games, science fairs, high school graduation. In every photo, his smile was radiant, and in most, we were together, my arm around his shoulders or his around my waist. When had that changed? When had I become someone to be embarrassed by? To be seated at the back of the room, to be served cold leftovers, to be mocked? The truth settled heavily upon me. It hadn't happened overnight. It had been a gradual erosion, years of small slights and growing distance. Michael calling less frequently, visits home becoming shorter and rarer, conversations becoming superficial. And I had allowed it, making excuses, telling myself it was normal for children to grow apart from their parents as they built their own lives. But what had happened last night wasn't normal. It was cruel. And in permitting the small disrespects, I had enabled the larger ones. My phone rang, startling me. It was Marge, my closest friend back home, who had also attended the wedding but left early due to her arthritis. "Eleanor? How are you doing this morning?" "I've been better," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I saw what happened last night," she said, "with the seating and the dinner. And I overheard what Michael said." Fresh tears threatened. "You did. It was unforgivable," Marge said firmly. "Absolutely unforgivable." I wanted to say something, but you were already gone by the time I made my way over. "I left right after." "Good for you. I would have too." There was a pause. "Eleanor, you know I love Michael. I've known him since he was in diapers. But what he did last night crossed a line." Hearing Marge's outrage validated my own feelings. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being too sensitive. What had happened was genuinely wrong. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted. "What do you want to do?" Marge asked. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary to Michael's needs, to maintaining peace, to being the ever-supportive mother. "I want respect," I said finally, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I deserve respect." "Yes, you do," Marge agreed. "And if Michael can't give you that, then maybe he doesn't deserve your support." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about Marge's words. What did respect look like in this relationship? What boundaries needed to be set? What consequences should there be for crossing those boundaries? I pulled out a notepad from the hotel desk and began to write. 2 letters took shape, one to Michael, expressing my hurt and establishing clear expectations for our relationship moving forward, and one to myself, a promise that I would no longer accept treatment that diminished my worth. Next, I called my financial advisor back home. I had put off making certain decisions, always with Michael in mind. "Jim? It's Eleanor Thompson. I need to make some changes to my will and investments." For years, I had planned to leave my small house to Michael, along with my modest savings. I had kept working part-time at the insurance office well past retirement age to build that nest egg. But now I made different arrangements. Half would go to the community college scholarship fund for single parents. The other half would be held in trust with conditions. After the call, I felt lighter. I made appointments with a lawyer and a therapist for when I returned home. Then I showered, dressed, and finished packing. As I zipped my suitcase, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. I had spent decades giving everything I had to my son. Now it was time to reclaim some of that energy for myself. Before leaving for the airport, I wrote a short note to be delivered to Michael and Stephanie's hotel room, explaining that I had needed to return home early. I kept it simple, without recrimination. There would be time for deeper conversations later, when I wasn't raw with hurt and when he might be more receptive to hearing my truth. On the flight home, watching the country pass beneath me, I made plans. I would volunteer at the women's shelter where Marge worked. I would join the community theater group I'd always been interested in but too busy for. I would take that painting class at the community center. I would build a life that was full and meaningful, regardless of whether Michael was a part of it. And if he chose to be part of it, it would be on new terms that included mutual respect and recognition of my worth. By the time the plane touched down in Nebraska, I felt stronger. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but alongside it was a sense of purpose, of self-respect rekindled. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee in my quiet kitchen. Michael hadn't called. I hadn't expected him to. He was probably on his honeymoon by now, or at least caught up in post-wedding activities. But soon, he would notice my changed behavior. Soon he would have to decide whether our relationship was worth the effort of true respect. I opened my laptop and began researching the women's shelter where Marge volunteered. They needed help with resume writing and job interview preparation for their clients. With my years of office experience, I could offer something valuable there. I sent an email expressing my interest. Then I called the community theater and signed up for their upcoming auditions. Nothing major, just a small role perhaps, or helping backstage. Something to connect me with others, to expand my world beyond the narrow focus it had held for so long. As I moved through my day, I felt a strange combination of grief and liberation. I grieved for the relationship I had thought I had with my son, for the future I had imagined. But I felt liberated from the one-sided nature of our connection, from the constant striving for approval that was never quite granted. That evening, as I watered my small garden, I realized something important. I had been waiting for Michael's permission to live fully, to matter. No more. Whether or not he ever acknowledged my worth, I knew it now. And I would live accordingly. A week passed with no contact from Michael. I knew he and Stephanie had planned a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, so I hadn't expected to hear from him yet. Still, the silence was a reminder of our new reality. I kept busy, methodically executing the plans I had made on the flight home. I met with my lawyer and finalized the changes to my will. My small house, which I had planned to leave to Michael, would now go to a local housing program for single mothers, unless Michael met certain conditions in our relationship over the next 2 years. My savings would be similarly divided. It wasn't about punishing Michael. It was about aligning my legacy with my values. If Michael could demonstrate that he valued our relationship and respected me as his mother, he would still inherit. If not, my resources would go to those who understood their worth. I started volunteering at the women's shelter 3 afternoons a week. Many of the women there had left abusive relationships with nothing but their children and the clothes on their backs. I helped them prepare resumes, practice interview skills, and navigate social services. Their courage in starting over inspired me. "You're good at this," Marge told me after watching me help a young mother prepare for a job interview. "You explain things clearly, but more than that, you make them believe in themselves." "I've had practice," I said with a small smile. Single motherhood is its own kind of starting over. As the days passed, I found myself sleeping better, smiling more genuinely. I joined a weekly coffee group with other women my age. I signed up for a painting class. I began to build a life that was about me, not just about being Michael's mother. 18 days after the wedding, my phone rang with Michael's number. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Michael." "Mom, how are you? Sorry I haven't called sooner, but Italy was amazing. The Amalfi Coast is just like the pictures, maybe even better." His voice was cheerful, as if nothing had happened, as if he expected everything to continue as it always had. "It sounds lovely," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Stephanie got a little sunburn the first day, but otherwise it was perfect. Hey, we brought you back a little ceramic dish thing." Stephanie picked it out. That was thoughtful. There was a pause, and I could almost see him registering that something was different. My voice wasn't warming as it usually did. I wasn't asking eager questions about his trip or telling him how much I missed him. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he finally asked. "Actually, no," I said calmly. "Everything is not okay. We need to have a serious conversation about what happened at your wedding reception, but I prefer to do it in person. When were you planning to visit next?" Another pause, longer this time. We hadn't really made plans yet. We just got back and work is crazy." "I understand. Please let me know when you have time to visit. It's important." The call ended soon after, with Michael sounding confused and slightly defensive. I hadn't raised my voice or made accusations, but I had broken our usual pattern where I accommodated whatever he wanted without question. 2 weeks later, Michael called to say he and Stephanie would be driving through Nebraska the following weekend on their way to a friend's destination birthday in Colorado. They could stop by for lunch. I agreed, suggesting they come to my house rather than meeting at a restaurant. This conversation needed privacy. When the day arrived, I prepared a simple lunch, nothing elaborate. Just sandwiches and salad. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just provide basic hospitality. They arrived shortly after noon, Michael looking wary and Stephanie polite but distant. After brief hugs and questions about their trip, we sat down to eat. "So what's this serious conversation we need to have?" Michael asked, attempting a light tone but not quite succeeding. I set down my napkin. "I want to talk about what happened at your wedding reception." Michael's expression shifted between confusion and defensiveness. "What do you mean?" "The wedding was great. I'm referring specifically to the seating arrangements being excluded from photos, and most importantly, the incident during dinner when you told Stephanie, loud enough for everyone to hear, that I was used to eating what life leaves behind." Michael's face flushed. Stephanie looked down at her plate. "Mom, it was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it." "It wasn't funny, Michael. It was humiliating." Az was being seated at the farthest table, being served cold leftovers after everyone else had eaten, and being treated like an afterthought at your wedding. "You're being too sensitive," he said, his tone hardening. "It was a busy day. Not everything went perfectly." And that comment. I was just trying to lighten the mood because the service was slow. By mocking the circumstances I lived in while raising you alone? By making me the butt of a joke in front of strangers? Silence fell. Stephanie shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Michael never told me much about your life together," she said suddenly. "Just that you lived in Nebraska and worked in an office." I looked at her, seeing genuine discomfort in her expression. "I raised Michael alone from the time he was 3 years old. His father left and never sent a dime in child support. I worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. Sometimes I skipped meals so Michael could have what he needed." Stephanie's eyes widened. She turned to Michael. "You never told me any of that." Michael's face was red now. "It wasn't relevant. That was a long time ago." "It shaped who you are," I said quietly. "And it shaped who I am. Those years matter, Michael. They're part of our story. And to hear you mock those struggles." "I wasn't mocking you," he exploded. "It was just a stupid comment. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Because it wasn't just the comment. It was being seated at the back of the room. It was being excluded from family photos. It was being introduced to your college friends who clearly knew nothing about me. It was watching you thank Stephanie's family in your speech without a single mention of your own. Michael stood up, pacing in agitation. "So I didn't orchestrate the perfect wedding experience for you. I'm sorry, but it was my wedding day, Mom. It wasn't about you. I never said it should have been about me. But I am your mother. The only parent who was there for you. I deserved basic respect and consideration." Stephanie touched Michael's arm, stopping his pacing. "Michael, sit down." Her tone was firm. He complied, though his face remained stormy. She turned to me. "Mrs. Thompson Eleanor, I owe you an apology. I didn't know about the seating or the dinner service. My mother handled those details. But I should have made sure you were properly included in the day. And I should have spoken up when Michael made that comment. It wasn't funny. It was cruel." Her sincerity surprised me. I nodded, acknowledging her words. Michael looked between us, his expression conflicted. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I was caught up in everything. The wedding, Stephanie's family, trying to fit in with them. Legacy. I don't know, I wanted to seem like I'd always belonged in their world. Even if that meant rejecting the world we shared." He had no answer for that. "Michael," I said gently, "I've made some decisions since the wedding. I'm building a life that isn't centered entirely around being your mother. I've changed my will and financial arrangements." "What?" His head snapped up. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm no longer leaving everything to you automatically. The house and my savings will go to charity unless certain conditions are met in our relationship over the next 2 years." "That's not fair," he exploded. "You're punishing me over one stupid comment." "It's not punishment, Michael. It's consequences. And it's not about one comment. It's about years of growing disrespect and distance." Stephanie placed her hand on his arm again. "Michael, stop and listen." He subsided, though anger still radiated from him. "I'm not closing the door on our relationship," I continued. "I'm asking for it to change. I want mutual respect. I want acknowledgement of our shared past. I want to be treated with basic dignity. And if I don't meet your conditions, he asked bitterly. Then you'll still have your life, your career, your marriage, and your relationship with Stephanie's family. You just won't have my house and savings. But more importantly, you won't have a meaningful relationship with me. Silence fell again. Michael stared at his plate, shoulders tense. Stephanie broke the silence. What can we do to make things right? I appreciated her willingness to engage. First, I'd like an honest apology from Michael, when he's ready to give one. Not today, not under pressure. When he truly understands why his actions were hurtful. Michael said nothing, still staring downward. Second, I'd like our interactions to be based on mutual respect going forward. That means regular communication, not just when you need something. It means acknowledging our shared history, not pretending your life began when you met Stephanie. And it means treating me with basic courtesy, especially in public. Is that all? Michael asked, a slight edge to his voice. I'd also recommend family counseling, I said. For all three of us. There are clearly issues we need to work through. He looked up. Counseling? Are you serious? Yes. This isn't just about one incident. It's about patterns in our relationship that have been building for years. Stephanie nodded. I think that's a good idea, Michael. We're starting our marriage. If there are issues with family relationships, better to address them now. Michael looked between us, clearly feeling outnumbered. I'll think about it, he finally muttered. They left soon after, the atmosphere tense but not hostile. Michael hugged me briefly at the door, an automatic gesture without warmth. Stephanie embraced me more genuinely, whispering, I'll talk to him. As their car pulled away, I felt drained but oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth to my son. Whether he chose to hear it was up to him. The following week, I received a text from Michael. Mom, I'm still processing everything, but I want you to know I'm thinking about what you said. Stephanie and I are looking into family counselors in Chicago. Maybe we could do virtual sessions? I'll call soon. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. A small step toward possible reconciliation. When Stephanie's parents called to invite me to dinner at their home the next time I visited Chicago, I politely declined, suggesting instead that we meet at a restaurant on neutral ground. They seemed surprised but agreed. Slowly, incrementally, the dynamic was shifting. I was no longer the supplicant, grateful for any crumbs of attention. I was an equal participant in these relationships, with the right to set boundaries and expectations. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and difficult conversations ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the possibility of a healthier relationship with my son. One based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided sacrifice. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have predicted. The night I left Michael's wedding in tears. My life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. My volunteer work at the women's shelter had evolved into a part-time paid position coordinating their life skills program. 3 days a week, I taught classes on financial literacy, job readiness, and navigating social services. Watching women rebuild their lives from scratch gave me perspective on my own challenges. I had made new friends through my painting class and community theater group. We met regularly for coffee or dinner, sharing stories and laughter. My world, which had once revolved almost exclusively around Michael, now encompassed a rich tapestry of relationships and activities. As for Michael and me, we had begun the slow, sometimes painful process of rebuilding our relationship. The virtual counseling sessions were awkward at first, with Michael defensive and me hesitant to express my full feelings. But over time, with the skilled guidance of our counselor, we began to communicate more honestly. During our 4th session, Michael finally offered the apology I had been waiting for. Mom, he said, his voice catching, I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the wedding, and not just that comment at dinner. The whole day, really. I didn't treat you with the respect you deserve. I was so caught up in impressing Stephanie's family that I pushed aside the one person who has always been there for me. I'm truly sorry. His words, delivered not under pressure but from genuine reflection, were a balm to my wounded heart. Thank you, Michael. That means a lot to me. I've been telling Stephanie more about our life together, he continued. The apartment we lived in, the times you worked double shifts so I could go on school trips, how you never missed a single baseball game even when you were exhausted. Stephanie, who joined some of our sessions, nodded. Michael never talked much about his childhood before. I think he was embarrassed about not having money. But now I understand why you were so hurt by how we treated you at the wedding. We excluded the person who made Michael who he is today. Their acknowledgement of our shared past was as important as the apology itself. They were seeing me not just as Michael's mother, an obligatory figure to be tolerated, but as a person with a story, with contributions that mattered. The path to reconciliation wasn't always smooth. There were still moments when old patterns emerged. Michael forgetting to call, making decisions without considering me, speaking to me with unconscious condescension. But now I had the confidence to address these moments directly, and Michael had the awareness to recognize and correct his behavior. 4 months after our first counseling session, Michael and Stephanie invited me to dinner at their apartment in Chicago. It was a simple meal they had prepared together, nothing elaborate. But the care with which they welcomed me, the family photos they had framed and displayed, including several from Michael's childhood, and the genuine interest they showed in my life spoke volumes about the changes taking place. After dinner, Michael brought out a small gift box. "Mom, we have something for you." Inside was a silver frame containing a photo from the wedding, one I hadn't seen before, taken during the ceremony. It showed Michael looking back at me in the audience, a genuine smile on his face. "The photographer caught this moment when I looked back and saw you," Michael explained. "I was nervous, and seeing you there, knowing how much you've always supported me, it meant everything." I felt tears gathering. "It's beautiful, thank you." "There's something else," Stephanie said, reaching into her drawer and pulling out a familiar small box, the one that had contained my grandmother's brooch, which I had taken back the night of the wedding. "We found this among the gifts after you left," she said. "We read your note about its history. I wasn't ready to give it then," I admitted. "Not after what happened." Michael nodded in understanding. "And now?" I considered the question. The brooch had been meant as a symbol of continuity, of family legacy. Was I ready to share that again? "Yes," I decided. "I'd like you to have it, Stephanie. Not because you're Michael's wife, but because I've come to know and respect you as a person." As Stephanie carefully pinned the brooch to her blouse, I felt a circle completing. Not the same circle I had imagined a year ago, but perhaps a stronger one, forged through conflict and resolution rather than obligation and silence. The most profound changes, though, weren't in my relationship with Michael, but in my relationship with myself. I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a capacity for setting boundaries and honoring my own worth. The painful experience at the wedding had catalyzed a transformation that might otherwise have never occurred. I no longer defined myself primarily as Michael's mother. I was Eleanor Thompson, program coordinator, community theater enthusiast, amateur painter, loyal friend, and yes, mother to Michael. But that was one facet of my identity, not its entirety. I had learned that true family relationships cannot survive on sacrifice alone. They require mutual respect, honest communication, and the willingness to acknowledge harm and make amends. I had discovered that it's never too late to reclaim your sense of self-worth, to demand the respect you deserve, to build a life that reflects your values. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that sometimes you need to walk away, if only temporarily, to find your way back to what matters. As I prepare to welcome Michael and Stephanie for their first visit to my home since our confrontation a year ago, I feel a sense of peace. We are not perfect. Our relationship is still evolving. But we are moving forward with eyes open, with honesty and mutual respect. That painful wedding day was not the end of our story, but a turning point. The moment I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to save your relationship with them? Or have you stood your ground and demanded respect when it wasn't freely given? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for your own worth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor yourself in all your relationships.